Peace be to you. In the problem of evil. Let us begin with the question.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Curiosity Catholic, the Evangelion podcast, sharing in the mission to light the fire of Christ in the hearts of Catholics by sharing the truth of our faith in a compelling manner. In this podcast, we're going to be picking the brains of Catholic enthusiasts to try and get to the bottom of how to live truly as a Catholic in contemporary times. My name is Dominic Meligeri, and in this episode, we have none other than Joshua King joining us. How's it going, Josh?
Hey, it's good. Yeah, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. Me and Josh are pretty good mates. He's my anchor in the Exodus 90 fraternity. How's that going, Josh?
It's pretty tough. It's like my fourth rodeo now, and 3 times prior to becoming Catholic, first time Catholic. So I don't know if that makes a difference, but kind of know what my faults are, and it's good. I really appreciate the spiritual growth that I get from it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is your fourth rodeo, but this is the first time with me as an anchor. So you've got a lot going for you this time.
Yeah. Well, that's always interesting. Every time we've done it twice together now, have we? Before this one?
Yeah, I feel like we've done it 3 times before because you were doing it one time when I wasn't, but we were hanging out a lot.
Yeah, and you'd done it the year before, so it was it's quite interesting. So now we're doing it together and give each other a hard time. Bunch of crazy guys, so probably deserve each other, I think.
So you mentioned just then that this is the first year you're doing Exodus 90 as a Catholic. Now, we often start each podcast asking the question, are you a cradle or a convert to Catholicism? The answer seems to be there. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. What would you like to know? It's a long journey story, I guess. I became a Christian. I was a Protestant, I guess. I never saw myself as a Protestant, such a weird term, but I would just see non-Catholic. Not any particular denomination. Growing up as a child, my parents grew up, raised me primarily in this sort of Pentecostal background with Life Church. And they came from Christian Life Centre in Australia prior to moving here when I was born. And Christian Life Centre in Australia is Hillsong Church now. So that's kind of my background. My dad was the music director of Hillsong Church when it was CLC. Built the whole music director team up, got involved in starting the Hillsong conferences, run workshops, and then he left that church just as they were taking off, and they sort of put their band together and stuff. And then I grew up in Christian Life Centre, went to some Presbyterian churches after that when my dad no longer did the music directing there, and he was sort of just moving around churches doing music directing. And we went to couple Presbyterian churches, and 8 Assemblies of God church, or sort of a disconnected non-denominational Assemblies of God, which is also sort of a evangelical Pentecostal background.
So you were brought up in a Protestant kind of background, and your dad essentially started Hillsong, but then left the organisation before it became Hillsong. So I guess, because you mentioned a lot of different denominations there, so could you...
Yeah, it wasn't too broad a denominational range. I guess you have Pentecostal, Presbyterian, sort of evangelical, still Pentecostal really, and then Anglican. So these are kind of the backgrounds of, I guess, churches I went to. None of them were really strongly Reformed theology, which is, your strong theological Protestants. They will usually have that kind of a background, typically, if they're well educated in the Bible and opposed to Catholicism. They tend to have stronger arguments against Catholicism, I would say. But the meme versions all come from, maybe fundamentalist evangelical, is what I would say. But
so what was your perception of Catholicism growing up in those denominations?
Yeah, you kind of don't really think too much about it, really. I guess my memory of it would be, that's just that massive cult that's kind of like, dominantly, nominalistically owning most of the Christians in the world, but that's because the world's coming to an end, and the Bible talks about the few that remain, and so those who aren't caught up in all the religiosity of the massive cult and all the other many thousands of cults that are around. And I guess like you just kind of put the pieces together for yourself growing up, where you just hear, I guess, meme arguments or just random false points about Catholicism from randoms now and then about how they believe in saved by works and different things like this. And you just sort of think, well, I guess the church just kind of went off the rails at some point. They took on too many things, went a little bit wacky. Then you had, vague ideas of the indulgences and stuff, and trying to sell your salvation to people and saving people who have died, etc. These are the things you hear, and you just kind of go, well, yeah, it's just like Jehovah's Witnesses, or just like Mormons, or they're just like the super religious odd version of Christianity. But you never really question it, right? Because every single person it's just obvious to everybody that it's false. Every single denominational church you go to, it's kind of like, oh, they're weird. Even if you interact with maybe strong liberal type Christians as opposed to more conservative Christians, they're still going to, even though they might have sympathy or really appreciate certain spiritual expressions of the Catholic faith, they're still going to talk and make little quips and jokes as if, yeah, they're weird, which is what you sort of just think about other cults. So yeah, you do have this sort of, it's a bit of a cult type attitude.
So when you said your wife is a cradle Catholic, so when you met her, were you like, I need to get her out of this cult?
No, not really. I talk to everyone about spiritual things wherever I meet them, just because, I don't know, I just find it really interesting. I've always been interested in why people think the way that they do and why they aren't Christian, or why they, what they think about Christianity. And of course, with the Catholics, I would see it the same. I'd be like, Catholics, what do you think about Christianity? Because I sort of, not that I didn't see them as Christian, just that I would see them as weird Christians, maybe. So when I met Natalie, we'd just have yarns about spiritual matters, like I would with my Muslim friends, like I would with even atheists. If they said anything that sounded somewhat spiritual, I would make analogies to Christian ideas that might connect with something they're talking about. And she thought I was crazy because she was like, "Who's this guy who talks about spiritual stuff? That's wackadoodle." And and then of course she fell for me, of course, and the rest is history. And I guess the thing that I actually fell for her, because I felt like for the first time in my life I'd met someone who talked about their relationship with God in the same way that I experienced my relationship with God. It was very like personal, just like I could talk to God like my mate every day, but like someone who was my God in every way. But it was like he was there like an older brother in a way, who's there looking out for you, and you might just be just talking to God every day about random things, just like sharing how you feel about things like you would with your older brother walking down the street or whatnot. And she sort of talked about her relationship in that way, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing, like this is awesome, I love this person. And also she was like, I always just thought she would be the most amazing wife, as mum as well, to like my kids, so I was really attracted to that. And then there was this other guy, who was hanging around, and I was like, oh, I better like get in on the whole boyfriend status thing quickly while she's not hanging with that other dude, otherwise I might miss out. And then the rest is history. So
that's cool. So was it your wife that eventually brought you over to the
no
faith? No.
Yeah, I guess she definitely had a very well practiced Catholic faith and a real personal, intimate relationship with God. But we were together for 4 years before we got married, and she ended up feeling like, oh, maybe it's probably okay to go to a non-Catholic church. And so we started going around to different non-Catholic churches together. And we eventually, like, I don't know how many years that would have been, maybe 6 years or 7 years together in non-Catholic environments. But yeah, I definitely would say her faith, her connection with God and her relationship with God massively struggled. in Protestant churches, and I couldn't really understand why. We'd had lots of discussions about it, but it wasn't clear to me. And then I basically, completely independent. I didn't know any Catholics really, and she wasn't able to give me the kinds of explanations or understandings of what is going on with Catholicism, in terms of practices, in terms of what's going on in the Mass. And I was like, okay, well, this just feels weird to me. I can't really participate. I don't know what's going on. So it wasn't like she was a Catholic person who I knew, who I could sort of go to and ask questions and get all this information from, But yeah, I just eventually became Catholic through another crazy journey. And then I was sort of pulling her back, saying, hey, let's go to a Catholic church. And she's like, what the heck? Like,
yeah, man, so it sounds like a bit of a whirlwind tour for your wife there.
It's a bit of a whirlwind. But yeah, I think, since we started going back to Catholic church, she's really, she's sitting right next to me, so she's listening to me like talk about her. It's a bit awkward, but not really. We're pretty open and honest. And I think she finds my representations relatively fair. So hand. But yeah, so it's a bit hard, I think, for her, like feeling challenged by whatever that means, me becoming Catholic. I think she said the last thing she would have ever imagined is me becoming Catholic and then like our firstborn son being baptized. Like, I remember that day she's like, I never could have imagined this ever happening. And I think that's what she wanted, before the early days, or from her partner in life. But she'd given up on that, like, within a couple of years or so, when she sort of decided, God's still present in the non-Catholic churches, and we kind of moved away from that. I think she'd given up on all that, and so that was a milestone. That was kind of groundbreaking that day. I think spiritually for her and for both of us in a way. So yeah, Edward, my son, was baptized like in May, I think, and I was in March of 2021.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, mate. So that's really cool. So you got baptized like really close to when your son got baptized. So that means, like, as a Protestant, you weren't baptized.
Nah. Yeah. That's I don't want to be too harsh, because I don't know. I don't know whether that's just like a byproduct of non-denominational Pentecostal churches, whether they're just not. I think there's like a strand of theology within sort of not super theological denominations, which believes, once you believe in your heart and you've received Christ into your heart, or like you've given your life to God, given your life to Jesus, that the Spirit, the Holy Spirit will then dwell in you and have effect in you, and that it's that part of your life that saves you. It's that trust, and that once you're saved, it's like you're a Christian now. Whereas it's not quite the same in Catholicism. You can be saved and not a Christian. So it's quite interesting. You can be there's this sort of like these distinctions that are made, just because it's this like well-developed theology, a very good understanding of what all these terms mean. A lot of it's just sort of like grammar. Like, do you even know the dictionary, bro? Like,
okay,
do you know the theological dictionary? Like, do you know what you're saying when you say things? But like general vibe words, the common person's theological language is still like good enough, like quite significant enough to have a really deep, connection to God. In many ways, God's grace is definitely extended far beyond many of the religious. Not religious. Well, religious, is the correct term, but not in a kind of the way the secular people say the word religious. But God's grace is often quite extensive in its ability to affect and deeply draw people and change people and grow people beyond, say, beyond the sacraments. Though the sacraments are like extremely powerful and the normal means of God's grace. I think like for someone who's had really deep connections with God outside of the sacraments, when they come into the Catholic Church and then experience the sacraments, they kind of bring a lot of that with them into the sacraments, and the sacraments can have a profoundly deeper effect on them than they might on many Catholics who participate in them. But it's very mysterious. I don't think we know what all the things that are going on when we participate in these. So I'll just stop there because we don't want to get into problem areas, I guess.
So you became Catholic. You got welcomed to the church in the last year. What was it that made you think, actually, no, Catholicism is the way forward, and then made you want to get baptized and fully enter into like the sacramentality? Because like when you think about, I mean, when I think about like, you know, Hillsong Church and Pentecostal and evangelical churches, I feel like it's about as far away from like the Catholic Church as possible. They have like stereotypically they have better music, they've got better community, more outreach programs, whereas typically, you know, in the Catholic Church it's kind of like a sometimes it's a bit of a drab parish, and you've just got the sacraments. So if you don't know what the sacraments are, you don't really get much out of the, you know, everyday parish life. So what made you want to leave all that exciting stuff and go and join the church?
Well, the exciting stuff's a bit overrated, I think. I mean, you can always get hype, and hype is great. But, you know, there's a lot of religions that have hype, you know. There's a lot of spiritual expressions that have hype that are not Christian. And, you know, these things, they are really great for an early start for like a baby Christian, you know. I guess like in the Bible it talks about having milk and then we need to start eating solid food. And I think God's constantly drawing us to a deeper spirituality and constantly drawing us into more holiness and more growth. And we just yearn for it all the time. We yearn to learn, we yearn to grow, and yearn to understand the things that bug us. And I think that eventually you find that once you're eating candy for too long, or once you're eating, like, you know, you can have the most delicious cake in the world, it'd be amazing, great dessert, but you eat it every single day, it's every single meal, you're going to end up being like, I want something more. And when that group can't give you something more, when there's nowhere to turn, and you just go to a different church, different denomination, and then you find that that one is, you know, it's got some other stuff, but then that one becomes, it's like having hot dogs every single day. You know, you're like, oh, this is so much better, it's meat, it's got sauce, it's like savory, it's not sweet anymore. And then you're like, you know what, I feel like throwing up this hot dog, and like, what else have we got? And no one can point you to anything significant, so you go to a different church. And I think that's what I think that's something that's I've experienced in a lot of churches, and it's part of, I think it was a big part of my growth towards understanding Catholicism as being like a place where an appreciation for all truth from all denominations are recognized and not thrown out. And I think when you're within these other denominations and you kind of meet these little cliquey groups within your church, they tend to, you know, throw out other spiritual expressions, throw out other denominations as being wacky, or being like stiff, or being wrong, or being just wrong, and like not the way forward. Like just like, and a lot of people often have this attitude, oh, I've been there, I've done that, you know, that's like the weak Christianity. But in Catholicism, I think there's a push and a strong emphasis built into the whole church that every expression is valid, and every expression has a key component to expressing the Christian faith, the Catholic faith. And you can always ask questions, and there's always answers to turn to. And that whole facet was a big part of the journey to Catholicism. But if you, what made me become Catholic is really, I walked into the Catholic chaplaincy at the University of Auckland when I was doing my ministry work there. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to ask questions to these guys because I'm someone who's doing ministry at Auckland Uni, and I ask questions and I help people to know God and grow closer to God. So I can go and talk to these culty people, and I can ask questions about whatever they think they believe, things that seem weird to me, and I can just, you know, just have fun, like asking questions, and I'm going to help them grow closer to God and out of whatever weird religion they may have. But I didn't understand what religion it was. I just had questions, and suddenly I realized these guys are awesome. These guys talk about theology better than anyone I've ever talked to. These people are so open. They're not super educated, but the answers they give make sense, and my objections dissolve when they give their answers to just trying to understand what they believe. And I kept going through that journey because I enjoyed the conversation, and I was just sort of amazed at this community there of people who were so sold for the truth, and yet they weren't, intellectually theological, like hardcore analytical, haven't coming up with arguments. They were just talking casually, and the stuff they were saying was just so comprehensible and made sense. And I was asking questions about things that I thought didn't make sense. So that journey just kept going and going and going. And I think about 6 months to a year in, I had a strong feeling that, Catholicism was going to turn out to be true. That I was slowly building a case for it, and I was slowly building sort of a worldview of Catholicism. And anything that I had an objection to, I kind of sort of wondered. Every time I learnt a new objection didn't exist and my understanding was wrong and the actual understanding was fine. It was just a matter of whether it was true or not. Every time that happened for any particular issue, the case for Catholicism would keep growing, and my doubt of the objections to Catholicism were growing, even though I hadn't asked the questions yet. And eventually, and every now and again, like, you would say, "Hey, why aren't you Christian, bro? Why aren't you Catholic, bro?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I know, I'm thinking about it." But it was good because, just you asking me that maybe every 6 months kind of pushed me to actually think. I believe, I accept a lot of these Catholic ideas as being the best expression of Christian understanding. I think I had a lot of Catholic perspectives well before becoming Catholic anyway, because I was not Reformed at all. I really felt there was a lot of holes and a lot of unexplained oddities about Reformed theology. And anyone who's Reformed listening to this might grind their gears because they think I'm just I don't know enough or something, and that's fine. I'd love to have a conversation with them. But frankly, I was more of a sort of Molinist theological perspective on matters of free will and our relationship to God and salvation. And that's a big point for Calvinism and Reformed theology. And so that really helped. And I just, it was quite weird actually. I think there was maybe 2 or 3 times where I really started asking myself a question. I feel quite comfortable with a lot of Catholicism right now. Why am I not taking steps further into the community, further into a deeper exploration spiritually, further into accepting certain teachings I think are correct? This would happen every now and again. And I think there's about 2 or 3 times where I had like quite a substantial, I'd made a lot of sense in my head, but I hadn't committed in my heart in practice or in sort of participation. And I felt challenged by that. And it was around times I would get sick. I would be sick for a week or get a cold or flu or something. And I would have I used to sleep a lot. I would sleep all the time. Whenever I get sick, I'd just sleep all day because it was faster recovery. And I found that I was having these weird dreams about me arguing about theological issues, or just weird dreams that I can't even remember anymore, that were spiritual dreams, like about spiritual things and about me questioning or me becoming Catholic or taking steps forward. And then me being like, yeah, but there's this issue. And in my dream, I would be like, that's not an issue. And something would happen where I would really deeply realize that this actually has no problem whatsoever. There's no issue here, and I'd have nothing to be afraid of. And then I'd wake up and I would be like, it's almost like I'd taken the step from that point. I'd wake up and I was like, yeah, this is not a problem. And I felt completely satisfied, and I was then I would start doing more things. I would start participating more, going, maybe either that was like going to mass, or maybe it was like praying to saints on occasion, or maybe it was like doing a divine mercy with you guys at the chaplaincy, or doing Exodus 90, and then eventually there was a stage where I was like, okay, well, what does it take to actually become a Catholic, and then spending sort of 6 months trying to coordinate and arrange that with Father Chris, the chaplain priest at the time.
Yeah, that's really cool. So like you're talking about like your experience of like how like it's really like it's kind of miraculous in a sense, like just the idea of like you had that inkling is that I'm just going to go in here and start talking to the Catholics? Because you had a ministry, which I think you were involved in a ministry, which was like an apologetics ministry, and so like asking questions is part of what you do there, and so like
it's probably an essential. It's the core of what we do.
And so you went into this. You were like, okay, I'm going to get these guys out of their like religiosity, which is incorrect, and you ended up going deeper yourself, and that was like just a really cool like initial point. And then I loved how you as you were talking about it, you were like, okay, I guess I'll just. You talked about like having that feeling that it's like, okay, this is right, so I'm just going to carry on hanging out here, and you just. So like you could see the Spirit moving in like how you were talking about it, and then God works in mysterious ways. You got sick, and then He started talking to you through you in your dreams, and then it's just really beautiful. And I suppose it's about what you surround yourself with, and if you're actually seeking truth, God will kind of honor that in a way, and He did with you.
Yeah, I would have to say. It was like a 2 to 3 year journey from the point of first walking into the chaplaincy to the day I got baptized, right?
Yeah.
I would say I was fairly fully Catholic, 6 months before I got baptized, but it was still, up to 3 years. But yeah, I mean, I remember, well, actually I've lost my train of thought now, but it was a pretty crazy journey. It was a crazy journey.
For those listening that didn't quite make the connection, that's when me and Josh met. He started coming to the chaplaincy whilst I was a chaplain, and I kept on asking the one question I ask everyone that's not Catholic that comes into the chaplaincy, so why aren't you a Catholic? And see if they've got good enough reason. And apparently Josh didn't. And now he's a Catholic. So just ask people, all you out there. So let's talk about like... well, not necessarily talk about your ministry, but talk about like apologetics. So you working in apologetics. How long were you working in apologetics for?
I think I've been working with this apologetics ministry for 6 years now. So basically,
and what is apologetics?
What is apologetics? Yeah, these are good questions. Apologetics is basically it comes from the Greek word apologia, which basically means a sort of legal reason to defense for something, and it comes up, I think, 1 Peter 3:16. I might have that wrong, but it's basically always be ready to give an answer for those who ask for a reason for the hope that is in you. And the word answer there is also could be translated defense, or it is what the word apologetics is. And it's basically saying, if someone's, it's sort of in the context of persecution, and it talks about doing it with deep reverence and respect for the one asking, but it is the context of persecution. And if someone's challenging you, you need to be ready to give some kind of defense for the hope that you have, and that might save your life. And you talk to any lawyer, they'll tell you that, or any Christian lawyer, they'll tell you that you need to win people when you're making a defense. It's not, my argument is logical, smackdown proof, and you're going to be compelled. It's like, no, you need to appeal to the person's humanity. Reason's part of that. But when you make a defense, that's what you're doing, because when you think about someone who's attacking you or coming at you or is going to kill you, and what can you say for why you believe what you believe that will satisfy them? And that's really the crux of apologetics, particularly Christian apologetics. If you do it with compassion, reverence for the person, you're really trying to satisfy them. And I would say you're really reassuring them. And so, this is why questions are so essential, because when you're reassuring someone, how can you have to ask questions. You have to understand where they're coming from, what their issue really is, and then just reconcile where you're coming from, what you understand, and what they think of you, and how they feel about life and the world. And that's really just a matter of exploration. You just have to be able to explore. You don't have to have arguments. And so we do a lot of training in the ministry that I worked with. We did a lot of training around asking questions, around being a good listener, someone who listens and really takes at face value what people say, and where they figures out where they're coming from, and does that relational process. Yeah.
I really liked what you said right at the beginning there about how, apologetics isn't purely about reason and logic, but it's about winning the person. Because I think I know I definitely had this perspective of apologetics. I was like, oh, you don't need to be apologists. You need to evangelize people. And to me, those things were different in my head. And I think Trent Horn makes a distinction. But basically, I think there's this attitude about apologetics where it's people like laying the smack down with the arguments. Oh, you think that? Oh, well, I can quote Thomas Aquinas and he says something against that. And often Thomas Aquinas is the mic drop that people use. It's kind of like, oh, well, in the Summa Theologica, la 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 la, so you don't have to believe that anymore. Win, next one. And so you get this attitude of apologetics where it's a case of it's just cold, hard, legalistic, here's the facts, deal with it. But you were saying that it's, that isn't apologetics. Those people probably aren't doing apologetics well.
Well, they're not doing Christian apologetics.
Okay.
You can always take the word in isolation. Oh, the word means defense, and in the context, it's a legal defense. That's what it means in Greek. So therefore, what does that mean? And I can be an ignorant person who's not a lawyer and think I know what that means. I can just be an ignorant person and think I know what that meant for the Greeks at the time. Like what the heck would I know? But people do that, and yeah, they think that, oh, well, it's just about winning the argument and proving your point. No, Christianity is very clear that you have to revere Christ as Lord, and you're following him and sacrificing yourself for others in your whole walk as with Christ. And that's actually part of the passage, revering Christ as Lord. And then also having a reason for your hope, and then doing all of that with deep reverence and respect for care and gentleness for the person that you're speaking with, even in the context of persecution of you, right? So when you're not in the context of persecution, apologetics isn't running out and just arguing people into the faith. People have to ask a question. They have to be interested in something you have to say before you speak. Otherwise, you're not doing apologetics, I would say. But yeah, when you are training yourself so that you can be a better apologist, or so that you can provide good apologetics and maybe help reconcile somebody in a more efficient or more effective way, when you're training yourself, yeah, sure, you're going to need to know all the kinds of objections to your faith. You don't have to, but you're going to be studying that content. That's what you'll be studying. You'll be studying what are the objections to our faith. What makes people offended by our faith? What do other belief systems actually believe about the world, and how does that contrast against what we believe about the world? And it's really just most of the time you're just trying to understand how other people think. It's really what you're doing when you're studying. And as Christians, we follow the God of truth, really. You can talk to a pagan and be like, we follow the God of truth. Our God is the God of truth. If there were one in your pagan community of gods, that's who our God is. Our God is the God of love as well. And you would just then, being the God of truth and the God of love, you exemplify that in your approach and engaging with someone. And I don't know anywhere else in the Bible that the word apologia is used, except for that context where you revere Christ as Lord and you have deep reverence and you approach people with gentleness. So Christians who don't do that and are really into their apologetics, I would say, you know what, you should really deeply reflect on your relationship with God. Yeah, and I think because another thing that there's that. Apologetics does often seem, from the outside, it seems cold, and it seems that way when I hear things like, oh, well, that's a logical fallacy, or when you mentioned Molinism earlier, I don't know what that is, and you talk about like all these different types of theologies, like, oh man, I'm gonna have to start reading some serious books in order to be able to start doing apologetics, but I don't think that's the way you need. I mean, if you've got the brain for it, by all means, learn Reformed theology and why it's wrong, and then when you meet someone that has that perspective, you go, oh, you're Reformed, and you believe these things, right? And you can take it from there. But like you said, you started your faith journey by saying, I'm going to go into this place and start asking questions. So
So, and that would that constitute apologetics? And also, what were those initial questions that you were kind of asking?
Well, I mean, yeah, my Catholic journey would just be the standard types of things that you hear. Why do you pray to the saints? Why do you worship Mary? I didn't say why do you worship Mary, but I would say something like, why does it seem like you worship Mary? I think that's that's a harder thing to respond to. I would always ask my questions in the hardest way possible. Mainly because the hardest way possible isn't a point to like get one over someone, but it's really more of a genuine exploration. The hardest things to answer are the most genuine explorations. This is why little kids' questions are really hard, because they're just genuinely interested in the deepest parts of their experience as a human, and like, who can answer that? So yeah, I think I would come in and I would ask these questions out of a sense of, this thing just doesn't make sense to me, and I want to understand it. And this really connects into that thing you were saying about, oh, I have to learn Thomas Aquinas or these arguments, or like learn what Reformed theology are and the points and why it's wrong, and then go, hey, you believe this, right? You believe that, right? It's like, nah, I would never do that. I think nobody should do that. I think, it's good. It might be good, useful in a very like specific context to understand some of the core parts of what a Reformed theologian believes, or just a person who goes to Reformed church might be being told, and so you can sort of understand the way that they think. If I talk to you and you feel like I understand you, how much more are you going to be interested in what I say? So it's not about saying, oh, you believe this, right? Well, that's wrong because blah blah blah. It's about just, do you make someone feel like you understand them when you talk to them, and do you clarify what they say and what they think? And you say, oh, so you go to a Reformed Anglican church. So, what do you think about this topic? And you might say a typical Reformed topic and let them tell you their version of it. So, this whole approach is really based on the idea that if you are a Christian, you follow the truest thing in existence, or the truest being, I guess, but not a being, but you follow truth, and you follow the essence of truth, because God is the essence of truth. And so you don't have to be afraid of anything, because if it's not true, it's like it doesn't exist in reality. And so if it doesn't exist in reality, how can you understand it? So your approach to breaking down arguments, and you made the point about there being fallacies, you don't kind of go into a discussion and go, oh, that's a fallacy. It's like, I mean, if that person really appreciates the concept of a fallacy and is really committed to avoiding fallacies, and they make a textbook fallacy, and they know what you're going to say when you say, oh, well, how is that not just this fallacy here? And even that, the way I said that sounds really gracious or gentle in the way I said it to someone who respects those words and understands that way of thinking. Then by all means say that. But otherwise, the way you presenting a fallacy to someone is typically done will be, oh, I don't really understand how in one case you say this thing, but then you say this other thing, and I don't get how they make sense together. Can you just help me wrap my head around that a bit more? And then you just talk around it, and people will just think their way out of these sort of weird positions that they hold, or they'll just kind of end up being a bit bewildered and like, oh, I don't know what to say to you, bro. And then you go, oh, okay, well, then I don't really know what you're saying then. And then you move on in your friendship. And then this happens over and over again. And I think people slowly begin to feel like they'll start asking you questions. And that's when you're really like, wow, that's cool. When someone starts asking you questions, and then you can just share your own testimonies.
Yeah, because that's another point you made of like, you can't really approach these things until someone is interested and wants to know the answer to something. And so, like, I was going to ask you in a bit about, like, how do you get them interested? But before we dive into that, I was thinking, like, I think also another perspective of apologetics is, how you're saying the word means defense, like a legal defense. And that's kind of aggressive almost, because like someone's coming at you and you need to defend. So it's like almost like, okay, I need to take this guy's knees out and I need to win this argument, because when you're defending, you're not defending to lose, right? So like, how do you avoid, like, I guess in yourself, because I mean that's where it comes from. Like, how do you avoid that desire or feeling of I need to win this argument, or that feeling of that kind of aggression?
I wonder if the feeling of I need to win this argument is really based out of fear and self-preservation. When you feel like the foundations of why you believe what you do are sort of breaking around you, and you don't know where that's going to lead, you don't know where you're going to end up, you're like, oh my gosh, scrambling to pull the pieces back together, and so your defensiveness gets up. And defensiveness is not what's meant by apologia, like, but making a defense, making an argument, persuading somebody, are all very taboo things in our culture, in this culture, particularly New Zealand culture. So that's like, I can understand people being quite offended by that. But my mate, who's a good lawyer, who really just articulated the true Christian apologist perspective, and he was doing it to reject apologetics to me when he was talking to me, which was so ironically awesome. He was saying essentially that you need to make your view compelling. How do you make what you believe compelling to somebody? And that means they feel compelled within themselves. And if you're like, oh, I'm going to win this argument, I'm going to slam them into the ground, that's not compelling. That makes people defensive. That makes people put off you. And if you think merely within the context of that scripture, where the passage comes from, which is in the context of persecution, how do you make the thing you're being accused of and the thing you're being threatened, having your life threatened over, compelling enough to the person who's threatening you so that they don't kill you, right? You're not going to just like go, oh, you're an idiot. Like, probably going to kill you. So there's a real tact of appealing to the people you're engaging with. And this is why I said initially, you're appealing to the people's humanity, every aspect of it, beyond not just reason, but meaning and value. Like, all of our reason is used and put to work for understanding and making better sense of the most meaningful parts of our lives, so that we can live a more meaningful and more significant life. And this is what reason is used for. This is what science is used for. This is what everyone is driven by. So reason is good and it's an essential tool, but meaning and value and human experience is what you're appealing to in every person. Reason being one part of that human experience. Sorry, I lost track of the question. I think I was just...
No, I think that's a good point. It's like, so what we need to do is, it's more about getting to know the person and weaving apologetics into that. Because I think like our situation is, I don't think we're going to find ourselves in a situation that you are in, where we're walking around a university campus, we see a Protestant chaplaincy, and I'm just going to go in there and start asking questions. It's more likely, we're in the break room at work, or we somehow get into a conversation in a supermarket, or probably less likely that, or like a family member or something. And like, so how do we bring the faith across in a compelling way that's not going to turn into an all-out argument? It's not going to turn into like an attack and defense kind of thing. And it's about that. So it's like, okay, it'd be easy with a family member. It's like, because you know them. But I suppose the result is we need to talk to the person, ask questions about them, to work out questions about themselves. Like why are they asking this question? Yeah, but I suppose, how do we get them to ask that question in the first place?
Yeah, so I think, anytime you get an opportunity to talk about spiritual matters with someone, you should try. And I think because you care about their life, and you might just be saying it because there's an idea in your life that you've learned that relates to something they've said, that you think, hey, maybe this will encourage them. There's a lot of people who say they're of one religion, but they really have a kind of like mishmash of religious spiritual beliefs. And so you can present a key aspect of your own faith and spiritual belief as sort of something that perhaps they could take on board, particularly if it's an idea that somewhat relates to something they're talking about, something they're struggling with, something they're thinking about. So I think it's just being curious and interested in what people say and think, and just, having a conversation with them. And what will happen is eventually you may find yourself disagreeing over certain things. And if you just ask enough questions about what somebody thinks and just sort of do that process of, but this doesn't make sense, and I don't see how you reconcile these aspects of life together with what you just said. and just let them talk. Eventually, they'll find themselves unable to answer certain questions, and as a result of that, they will naturally just ask you questions. So now they're asking you questions. Now they're asking you questions, and you have an opportunity to give, whatever that those questions allow for. Whether it's an aspect of your testimony, a testimony to the deep connection you have with God, the deep connection you have with a certain aspect of the way God relates to you. Maybe it's somewhat of a testimony to the gospel in some sense. And it might be more of a natural explanation. It doesn't have to be the gospel track that, takes people in and makes them Christian or something. It's really just about being open, explorative, and growing. But you said something that was really interesting to me, which was, you're not going to be, I mean, I don't know, you might, but maybe it's not as common for everyone to be walking around campus doing Christian ministry and then walking into sort of a chaplaincy opposed to their own theological beliefs and then start asking questions. Yeah, that's fair. But you may find yourself hanging out with some of your Protestant friends, going to some of their small groups, maybe going to a couple, Christian, non-Catholic worship. And what I would say is that I think for a Catholic, getting into these environments and just asking questions about what Protestants believe, or asking questions about why do they not believe in Catholicism, or like what do they believe? Why do they believe this weird thing? Like you say, you have like some position that you think's weird about what they believe in. I think the problem you're going to find as a Catholic is that Catholics are not like super strongly anti-Protestant. And there is no clear-cut teaching of Protestantism that even Catholics can even go, hey, that's weird. Why do you believe it? This is something all you Protestants do. Why do you all do this? It seems weird. But when you go the other way, yeah, Protestants are all going to have these sorts of things that they say about Catholicism, because there is a uniformity. There's like some aspect of unity or uniformity within Catholicism, which is the sacraments and a wide range of ideas and theological practices that are across all the different orders of Catholicism. So I think you're not going to have the ability to do what I did going into a Protestant community. Because Protestant communities, often what they profess as being a great truth that they follow are very often things that Catholicism accepts and agrees with. And perhaps I would argue Catholicism has an ability to articulate to a fuller and larger extent in a more beautiful way. So if you try and do what I did in the reverse, you're probably going to find yourself just agreeing with everything the Protestants say.
Yeah.
And going, yeah, well, that's a good thing.
Would you say maybe it might be a better idea to ask them things like why aren't you Catholic? Or why don't you guys revere Mary? Because then it'll bring up all the stuff that they've
Perhaps.
got. Or just, do you want to pray a rosary? Why not? Yeah,
like how do you get them sort of challenging you? And that might be hard for you, like if you can understand why Catholics are afraid to kind of engage with Protestants who are going to be like, can you believe all this weird stuff? And then you're like, oh, now I have to give them answers.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, well, maybe that's why the scripture says always be ready to give an answer, because you kind of, if you have the truth, you kind of have to give the answers in a sense. But if someone's not searching, then yeah, it's hard to explain that, I guess. I'm not too sure exactly how you would. I think the thing that's important for Catholics, that's what I was going to say, is that when you go in to hang out with Protestants, you're not going to go in asking tons of questions expecting to pull them out of their culty ways. I think that you're going to be grasping at straw. You're going to be like sort of trying to catch the wind. It's not going to be super effective. But what is going to be super effective is being super Catholic around them and just hanging out with them and being a really great witness to Christ in your Catholic walk. Because a lot of them think, you're a Catholic, you must be part of some culty thing. You don't really understand the gospel. You don't really understand Christianity. And if you just hang out with them and just literally say what you believe, they'll go, whoa, you actually are a Christian. That's so weird. And then every time they tell you about what they think, you go, yeah, I agree. And then you talk about it with them and they're like, what? How can you agree? You're a Catholic. Yeah. You're supposed to not agree. And what you'll find is Protestants are more defined by how they reject Catholicism, far more so than how they believe in something that's wrong. I don't think you'll find that. The things that they believe that are wrong are the things that they say Catholicism is wrong about. So, I think just hang around with them and just have great theological conversations with them and let them see that you are a profoundly awesome Christian, just like they think of their most fondest church members or family members, and then they're like, wow, you're like as awesome as my favorite Christians within my church, and you're a Catholic. How is that possible? And they'll be curious and they'll start asking you questions, and then you're going to have to do some work. That just let the natural process guide you. You're going to have to go and ask some questions, find some answers, but don't just find don't just find logical smackdown mic drop Thomas Aquinas answers. Like, actually find relatable answers, actually find compelling answers that, you can say, if this is just what Christians have always believed and this is just an acceptable thing to believe, what's wrong with it? Usually it's, I think for a lot of Protestants, if they don't have a strong reason to reject the practice, like this is obviously false or this is obviously contradictory with the Bible, their problem's going to be more like, this feels weird to me. It feels too much like when I pray to God. I don't want to pray to saints. I don't want to pray to Mary. It feels too much like what I think worship is. In which case you're just going to say, oh, well, then like, what is worship? Like, how do you define worship? And then out of that conversation might come, well, then what we're doing is not worship then, right? So then what's the problem? And so it's always, so then what's the problem that you're always asking? As a Catholic, it's always, oh, well, what's the problem that you have, given that you don't seem to articulate any problem at all with what we do, but yet you have a big problem with it. So I don't understand that.
Yeah.
So that will probably be something you do a lot more with the Protestant, and that journey of just being in a relationship. Invite them to stuff. Invite them to your group stuff events. I don't know. Yeah,
we're Catholics. We don't do group events. We just go to mass and go home. Now, I like what you're saying. The problem is it's way more. There's way much more effort in going into building relationships with Protestants than just rote learning a bunch of St. Thomas Aquinas quotes that I can just bash them with, which is way unfair. But so it's a lot more philosophical than it is theological. It's kind of like. They're saying it seems like what you're doing is worship, and then it's like, okay, so what is worship? And then discussing what worship is, and then say, well, we're not doing what that is, we're just doing veneration. And they're like, well, what's veneration? Okay, well, what is veneration? Let's discuss those topics. And it's like you say, like getting your like theological dictionary, right? It's like, well, you say worship's this, and that's not what we're doing right now.
I'd probably say try not to use words that are not part of their dictionary. So as an explanation, right? You don't want to come out and be like, well, that's just veneration. And they're like, what the heck are you talking? What did you say? Are you speaking English?
Yeah.
You might say, well, this is not worship. Like, this is just sort of revering and respecting the position that Mary has within the body of Christ. She's the Queen of Heaven. She's, in Israel, in ancient Israel, the king. The Queen of Israel was the mother of the king, and that she was the queen. So if Jesus is the king, right, the king of the Jews, and the king of the church, then who's the queen? Unless we chuck out Israel altogether, but Catholicism doesn't believe that. Obviously you could learn these little details. There's lots of little interesting details that you can just share passively, that you'll just come across as you explore things and ask questions, and ask the questions to the educated people that your Protestant friends are asking, and just explore. But not to give smackdown arguments, just to sort of say, oh, well, this is not that thing you're saying it is, so then what's the problem? That's really what you want to be doing, is this is not that thing you're saying it is, so what? I don't understand why you have a problem. And if it's just a feeling of unfamiliarity, or a feeling of awkwardness, or a feeling of, but my community doesn't like that, that sounds culty to me. That sounds odd and not open to truth. Well, there's like sort of ways that you can just sort of say, so you don't have a problem with Catholicism then. It just feels different to you. It's kind of like going into a Chinese culture and being like, oh, that feels weird because that sort of means something else when we do similar things in my English culture. So I kind of feel weird doing that, but I know it doesn't mean that here in China. So it's okay for me to do it, and you kind of become more okay with it. So it's really that type of thing. And it's good to try and maybe make that comparison when you're talking to people.
Yeah. It's like going to a culture where when they greet you, they kiss you on the cheek. Like if you're coming from England and going into that culture, you're going to get freaked out in the first instance. But then eventually, as you get more involved in that culture, you'll be kissing people on the cheek all the time. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah. Well, it's going to feel weird as well for quite a while for you. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong, right? Some cultures kiss on the lips, and that might be something that takes a long time for you to get over. You might just like stay out of that country and avoid those type of people.
I'm not going there ever again.
Just look kind of racist to everybody for some reason.
Yeah. So what you're saying is essentially the key to apologetics is exploring and being interested in Catholicism genuinely yourself, so that when you're in a situation where you're challenged, you're not fighting them back, but you're saying, I actually thought that was really interesting, and here's what I learned about it. And then, so you've already asked the questions yourself, and you're seeking, because at the moment I'm doing this theology of the body course based on Mary, and it's just like there's so much depth in there, and it's like, okay, I need to sizzle this down, so when I say it to someone that doesn't, that isn't Catholic or isn't even, or is only a little bit Catholic, they're not going to think I'm a freak. But yeah, it's going to have to be that seeking and searching within ourselves and through scriptures and into our own faith, so that when we're presented with concepts that don't meet up with it, it's like, well, I know that that's wrong because I'm so involved in my own faith.
Well, you might just be like, someone might say, oh, but don't you believe this, that, and the other? Don't you believe in asking saints to like do all these miracles for you? And so they replace Jesus, and you kind of like, sort of like you're worshipping them because you just like love them so much, and you ask them to do things for you rather than asking God. And then it's like they replace Jesus in your life. Like, what's that all about? I mean, even though you say you're not worshipping them, that seems weird that you're doing that, because it seems like worship, or it seems like an over excessive honoring of someone who is sort of not the point of your faith. This is a hard thing to respond to, but you don't have to say, well, I know that that's wrong. You don't have to know that what they're saying is wrong. You can just sort of be like, oh, well, yeah, I guess I sort of see where you're coming from maybe, but it's not really like that for me, or I don't really see, like, I'm not quite sure what your problem is, or I'm not too sure how to respond to that, but it doesn't seem your assertions or your push that you're trying to say about the way I'm behaving doesn't feel quite right. It doesn't fit quite right with what I know personally, or how I experience things. Or maybe I see some people and they look like they're doing it, but I don't know if what you're saying is a correct assessment. And so I guess I'll have to get back to you. Like, you can kind of just have that, because that is an honest answer. That's probably more honest than saying, well, I know that what you've said is wrong, or that there's something wrong with what you're saying. You can just kind of say, I'm not sure whether what you're saying is a fair representation of what's happening. And I guess we can keep talking about this and just explore it some more. And that's all you need to do. Because I think that's a more natural way. And I think we should try to be far more natural in the way that we do apologetics, or the way that we engage with others. And a huge thing to remember in your heart when you're doing this, when you're going through this, to stop yourself from getting defensive, to stop yourself from becoming argumentative, and to remain natural, is to just have that, is to just be confident about following truth, and to know that, wherever you follow truth, you will be following God, and that wherever truth is, there will be good answers, and satisfying answers, and reconciling answers. We know enough in our faith, even as a simple Christian or a simple Catholic, that God is love, and that God is the essence of all truth, and that he made all of the world and all of the universe, and that we are the body of people who are most closely and accurately following him. This is stuff that is simple, that we're told, that we're supposed to be able to believe. Now, if that's actually true, what we'll find is that there's so many amazing answers, like almost infinitely amazing answers in every area to explore with someone who's asking challenging questions. So we don't have to be afraid, and we can just have that simple, that doesn't feel like it fits quite right, what you're saying about my faith. So, let's explore that more together. And I can't give you I don't know if I can give, even if you know all the answers, often when someone says, has an objection for you, it's not going to be this is this, and this. It's going to be like, it kind of feels like you guys do this and that, and it seems weird to me. Now, there is no like straight answer for that, right? You can't give a knockdown answer to that kind of an objection. It
Yeah.
really is naturally an explorative journey that you're going to go on with them. So just allow it to be that, and just allow your own curiosities and your own questions and your own, things that you decided to stop asking about like 10 years ago, and go, actually, I'm going to dig that up and I'm going to start asking those questions, and I'm going to find some explanations and really start growing in that area of my life for the sake of this person who's struggling to connect with Catholicism.
Yeah, and like again, it's like bringing it back to the person. Like what you did when you were talking about that is saying, well, actually, that doesn't make sense to what I know, and I don't think it's a rather again. I feel like again, it's debunking that whole thing of apologetics is about the argument and winning the argument. It's like, no, it's not. Apologetics is about being a Christian. And in order to do that, you need to have that relationship with Christ, and you have to ask these questions and seek these things out. So, I think, I suppose points that we could take away from this conversation is, in order to be apologists, we first need to have a relationship with Christ, and that we need to want to get to know Christ and the church that He laid out for us, which involves we have to start searching ourselves and asking our own questions. And then when we're approached with a counter-argument, be it a Protestant, an atheist, a lapsed Catholic or something, it's not about saying the right thing. It's about starting the right relationship, where this conversation can turn into a journey. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. It's about just going on the journey with them, exploring what they say, and being open to wherever the truth leads, because the truth will always lead to Christ. The truth will always lead to God. And this is something we should be convicted of in our hearts, in our spirits, in our minds. And I think a lot of Christians, Catholic or not, are not convicted of this idea. I think they're very afraid of where things might lead. They've seen people cease to believe what they thought was Christianity. But I think I would just try to encourage everyone that basically anyone who's left the faith, what you'll find is that they don't really understand what the faith is. They never asked those questions. They never really fully pushed to the extent, really fully looking for the answers to those questions they had when they were younger, and they accepted certain perspectives of what their faith was that were maybe overly simplistic. And that led to a whole load of things that ended up contributing to their going, well, this is wrong. This faith thing is not legit. But what they're saying is not legit is not actually Catholicism. It's not actually the true faith that God has provided for us to really gain life from. So it's just be not afraid is what I would say.
Well, that's what the Bible says as well. Well, we've reached our about an hour mark. So all of you listening, Josh and I are going to be doing this on a regular basis. We're going to once a month. Josh and I are going to start doing an apologetics episode to Curiosity Catholic. We're going to take a series of arguments that have been posed against the Catholic Church. Josh is going to present them to me. I'm going to give my best answer, and he's going to pull apart how I could have done it better. And we're going to have a bit of a discussion about it. And we're going to be doing this live, so you guys can interact with it. It's going to be on the 4th week of the month, on a Wednesday probably. We'll see how that works with my shift work. So guys, stay tuned and check it out. Josh, is there anything you want to say to sign off? Where can people find you if they want to look at more of your stuff?
If you want to sort of check out some of what I would say is C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity type apologetics, you can check that out at thinkingmatters.co.nz, which is the ministry that I work for. But it is sort of run by a lot of Protestants, but I think what you'll find is nearly everything that's said in all of the content is very applicable to Catholic belief and practice. And I would say that even better than that, if you're a Catholic looking for good answers to many of the questions and just wanting to explore any subject, really, just wanting to explore any kind of question that you have about your faith, maybe a child question. So, what that thing I never really fully got an answer to. I highly recommend going to Catholic.com or Catholic Answers, Google Catholic Answers, and yeah, type in the search engine there. Just type in a keyword, a topic, an idea, a question, and I think you'll find a lot of articles there really, really interesting. And I really enjoy Trent Horn. I think he's really good. Got Matt Frad, really interesting podcast there. And I'm going to be starting my own YouTube channel, and I've kind of partially started it. Check out The Ignorant Catholic on YouTube. I will be interviewing many people who are non-Christians on all the contentious issues relating to the disagreement of our culture with Christianity and Catholicism. And I will be applying a lot of the principles that I've discussed today, just genuinely trying to explore what they believe and ask questions about things that don't make sense to me to see if we can really get anywhere. And I think there'll be some really awesome conversations. So yeah, look forward to sharing more about that in the future as I get my channel up and going. So thanks.
There we
for having
go.
me, man.
No worries. And of course, they can find you on the Curious Catholic once a month with me, and we're going to go through apologetics and start going through arguments and working out how to ask questions. So thank you very much, Josh, for joining us, and everybody for listening. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate this conversation. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Curious Catholic. If you did enjoy the episode, please do like, share, and subscribe to everything we do. We have the podcast, obviously, on all podcast apps. Give us a 5-star rating and put some positive comments in there. We've got our Facebook page, Instagram, and our YouTube channel. So Evangelion NZ is where you will find us. So check us out. Stay curious, stay Catholic. God bless.